Alrighty, Rangers, we'll do a quick 15, 20 minutes today. Hopefully you guys are getting on Google Classroom and checking this all out. And what we have is the Industrial Revolution going on. And yesterday we were talking about the rural to urban migration. All right? And industrialization and the steam engine are going to cause many of these changes in society as well. Cities began to grow much bigger. Now, during the Middle Ages, cities stayed, very small. However, by the 1800s, cities had exploded, like that activity I wanted to do with you guys. We were talking about yesterday. Until over 360 cities have a population of over 10,000. 17 have a population of over 100,000. Its massive growth in new urban populations was due to industrialization. And it created jobs and attracts people from the countryside for employment. So we're moving from the farmlands to the city for a job. Now these new cities, as you can see, weren't on the old medieval trading paths. Instead, they're on the coastline for shipping. Right? Where cities like Plymouth and Portsmouth, Hampton and Liverpool take over. They're on the English Channel and the Atlantic Ocean. If you look at here in the United States, look at some of the cities that we have, from Portland, Maine to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, New York City, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware, Norfolk, Virginia, Baltimore, Maryland, if I didn't put Baltimore in there, Wilmington, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina. We have these cities on the coast. It's all about trading. And so inland cities that had at one time been important during the Middle Ages are now done. They are not, they're kind of maybe holding steady, but they're not growing anymore. And even though these cities inland did not grow as rapidly, they remained vital to growth during the Industrial Revolution. Labor was cheaper outside the urban cities. We talked about Ricky Bobby and Richard Robert yesterday, and it was cheaper to build a factory in the countryside. And as you can see down here at the bottom. But factories also form a link between the large metropolises, think of like New York City, and the countryside. As factories were built, the towns I talked about yesterday grew around them to serve the factory workers. Houses, grocery stores, movie theaters, schools, you name it. So an entire service economy grows up around this large concentration of workers. So the big point of today is the changes in social structure. New cities and towns built by industrialization cause changes in the social structure. On top of the social hierarchy were the old school nobles, right? The old world nobles who had been in charge since time began. But now they're bankers, they're large business owners, or they're high-ranking members of the religious clergy. These men form small oligarchies, which are as a rule by a rich, powerful few, maybe 5 to 10 guys. And these guys are able to dominate town governments. But in industrialization, a new group, a new force comes into the game. They're known as the middle class, or the French term, this fancy one right here, the bourgeoisie. And it is the bourgeoisie, they are successful, but they're not extremely wealthy. But while they can't match the nobles in sheer money, it is their strength in their numbers that gave them power. Going back to Aristotle and the Gracchi brothers of Greece and Rome, aim for the middle class. And these are like everyman. You can't tell who they are because it's everybody. People who get up every day, they go to work, they they do their jobs, they go to the grocery store, they vote, they come home and they take care of their families. It's everybody just going about their normal, average, everyday job. And so for years they had been trying to become upwardly mobile. They're trying to get educated and they want access to power. But every time they try something, the noble classes thwart them. They put a blocker in their path. The aristocracy wants to hang on to power. Right? When you have power, what you want to do is suppress everybody underneath you. And so the aristocrats, the nobles, cling even more tightly to their ancient privileges. So eventually, the middle class is going to find a way to get access to power. Now, one of the big problems that exists, as soon as the middle class gets power, they quickly forget how they got there. So the middle class, or the upper middle class, gets power. They were helped there by the middle class and lower class, and as soon as they get it, ooh, you get away from me, you dirty, mangy creature. Why don't you go and get a job? And the middle class person says, but hey, I helped you get there. Well, yeah, I worked for it, but I don't want you to live in my neighborhood or go to my school. Right? So once they get there, it's the old saying, don't forget where you've come from. Well, they forgot where they were. They see the poor as a drain on their resources. Get a job, you miserable slob, and do something for yourself. And this is very weird. They didn't like being suppressed by the nobles, but now they turn and do it to everyone right beneath them. So it's very sad. And the people who suffer the most are going to be the artisans. The artisans suffer the most in industrialization, because for a long time, it was these guys, the skilled labor, carpenters, blacksmith, printers, people, stonemasons, people who build houses and build factories. They've been able to maintain their old medieval guilds. Remember when we had 4 blacksmiths in here, and Drew was, a blacksmith here, and over here it was Marquez, and back there it was Vaughn, and over here it was Juan. And what they did was they were able to, make sure that everybody had enough work. They charged the same price. Say, $4, $1 for every horseshoe. Same price and same quality. That way all 4 guys had work. Right? They were able to guarantee that everybody had a job. But with the Industrial Revolution, even though the horseshoes the 4 guys make are really good, a factory will make them quicker and cheaper. Instead of $1 for a horseshoe, it's now only 25 cents. Why pay $4 when you could only pay $1? Now, the ones that cost $1 aren't as good and they wear out faster, but I could buy 4 sets of crappy ones in place of one that's, a really expensive shoot. I'll roll the dice and buy the cheaper ones. Industrialization makes it possible to produce the same product, but quicker, faster, and cheaper. And so this is going to affect the family structure. So what we have in the Industrial Revolution is your status is based on your financial status, your profession, and your working situation. Business owner, poor, average, everyday Joe. So you've got the big businessmen in the upper middle class, the bourgeoisie. In the middle class, you have qualified workers. Doctors and lawyers would fit into this class down here. And then down here, you have what's called the proletariat, the poor guys who go into the factory every day, and the farmers. Upper, middle, and lower. And it's these family structures that are going to change. Typically, throughout world history, families work together. All right? Mom and dad would teach their children the skills they needed to do their job. Home life and economic life were interwoven. You were taught how to do your job. However, with the Industrial Revolution, dads now leave the home and they go to work in the factory. They may have to work 10, 12 hours a day. Plus, there's the commute time home. they become separated from their home for many hours. When they get home, they're really too tired to do much. And since by the mid-1830s, textile cloth production was being done in a factory by a machine, not done by hand. You didn't need skill anymore. These machines required little to no skill whatsoever. Remember that story I told you when I worked at GKN many years ago? My job was to run a machine and then make bullet points on how to operate it. And next to that, in case some people couldn't read, there were pictures. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And if you followed that chain, you couldn't screw the product up. With fathers gone up to 10 to 12 hours a day, children were no longer receiving their educations at home, as moms and dads had to do the work of both parents. Children are sent to work in factories, right? The little kids, you're not working on the farm, you got to come in and you have to help out. Some of you guys may have jobs. And so the plight of child labor was well documented, and it upsets many people. Why are these little kids doing these jobs? So in 1835, the English Factory Act is passed. And what the English Factory Act says was that students could only work an 8-hour day, and then they had to get 2 hours of schooling paid for by the factory. So you guys are at home here during coronavirus complaining about taking notes for 15 minutes. Imagine being one of these guys, right? No more than 8 hours in a day and then 2 hours of education paid for by the factory. Now we have to mention that not all children had to work full-time in factories. Some dads with fathers making more money as factory workers, their kids could stay home. Sorry, someone was engine running out there, kind of confused me. With dads making enough money, kids don't have to go to work at a young age. They can, in some cases, be able to go to school. They can get educated and find out that they've been getting the short end of the stick for many years. You always want your kid to do better than you. And women, women have, there's positives and negatives here. In some cases, families could live on the wages of the factory worker dad. All right, dad makes enough, maybe he's a manager or a department head or a land leader, and that's great. And this allows mom to have like the stereotypical gender roles where mom is linked to being a housewife, especially for middle class and upper middle class women. It was their job to be hero support, I call it, to have a welcoming family environment, to create a happy environment. All right? So, in the old days, you got off the school bus and mom had Kool-Aid and chocolate chip cookies and, hey, welcome home, kids. Nowadays, Kool-Aid is like liquid cancer and chocolate chips are bad, so you guys have like filtered Dasani water and like sea salted like kale chips or something. I don't know, when you come home, that is your snack while you decompress. But it is also, in a way, empowering, all right? The mother was in charge of the finances, all right? She balanced the checkbook, she grocery shopped, she paid the bills, and it gave her a sense of empowerment. I would be helpless without my wife. I'd roll over and cry. She's like a Hogwarts elf. I don't know what happens. Poof, we got food in the pantry. Poof, that the bills are paid. I don't know what goes on. My job is to work. For younger women, blessing and a curse, the beginning of this wage economy allows women to have more choices. For the first time ever, a woman has an option of staying on the farm or going to work in a city. If she does, she's going to have a choice of who she's going to marry. She doesn't have to marry her dad's friend on the farm next door where, she's a girl and the next door neighbor has a son, they're about the same age, they're automatically going to get married. No, she for the first time has a choice. She can pay her own dowry or the payment given to the father of the husband. Why that was a thing, I really don't know. On the negative side, women also are often exploited. They work the lowest skilled factory jobs for the lowest amounts of pay. People know once they're there, they are trapped. So women are put in sweatshops. They work for the lowest paying, lowest skilled jobs in terrible conditions, and were subject to constant harassment. So while the family unit doesn't disappear entirely, family ties were loosened as money could be sent great distances. Like, my great-grandpa coming from Europe and then sending money back home for everyone else to come over. Or they say the average age someone lives from their parents in the modern United States is 400, miles. Well, mine are 661 away, all right? So you can live in a different part of the country but still support the family. Children began to move away from home like me because of the Industrial Revolution. So tomorrow we'll talk about proletarianization and looking at the factory here. Here is what it is like in the Industrial Revolution. We can do this real fast. Proletarianization is where the worker no longer owns the factors of production. So, for a carpenter, it's his hammer and his saw. For a mechanic, it is his, toolbox. Well, everyone becomes like Charlie Bucket's dad in the new Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Remember, Charlie's dad was a toothpaste tube cap screwer honor. Well, if you can get a machine to do that, we no longer need you. Look at the McDonald's touchpads. You don't even go up to see Nazir and order at the counter. You actually go up to a giant, computer pad, eliminating some of those jobs. Human schedules are set up to match the machine. The blacksmiths can no longer control the quality of the price of an item. And so to compete, instead of having like tailor-made clothes, all the shoemakers make like a size 9. It may be a little bit too big, it may be a little bit too small, but that's the only way we can compete. As artisans were no longer needed, as less skill as a priority. All right? We want to increase production because that lowers the cost. And I will find anybody who needs help. If I'm in Boston and I need some cheap labor, I go down to the Boston docks and I see Seamus and Patty O'Shamrock. Hey boys, would you like to be American citizens? Come to work right here. If my workers complain, I can get another one. Right? I can always find someone to do it at a cheaper price and in worse conditions. So here you are. How'd you like to be one of these guys, just doing the same thing on the assembly line every day? Here is a tenement, this large apartment building that becomes your neighborhood, like New York City. It's the Irish neighborhood, the Italian neighborhood, the Jewish neighborhood, the Polish, the Russian, whatever. Your world is your little block where you live, all right? Here are the women working in textiles in an upper floor where it's this burning, nasty hot. And here are you guys, little kids, working in the factory, right here. Stick your arm in there, kid. That's what I need you for. So anyway, we'll go over new ways of thinking tomorrow. Hope you guys are doing well, and I hope to see you guys soon.